Hi, my name is Srikar Chedalavada, and today for my Comp 435 final presentation, I will be presenting on the security breach, the 2018 MyFitnessPal data breach. Looking at the table of contents and the agenda for the day, we're going to begin with a brief introduction about what MyFitnessPal is and the product they have, and also a small overview of the attack. Next, we'll be covering the attacker motivation and what potentially caused the attack, alongside the attack vector and how the attack occurred. We'll then move on to the fourth section, which is all about consequences from the primary, secondary, and tertiary perspectives. From there, we'll move on to the conclusion and what exactly you learned from today's presentation. And lastly, we're going to talk about the sources and potentially have a couple of questions to answer at the very end. So let's dive right into it. Focusing on the introduction, we can go over what exactly MyFitnessPal is. MyFitnessPal is a fitness tracking app, and this specific graphic demonstrates most of the features of the application. With a database of popular food items, a menu to provide real-time barcode scanning, and diagrams to present overall health and eating behavior, this application is extremely useful for those who are both casually or religiously counting their calories. It also caters to individuals keeping track of their physical exercise and body image, as it has a menu that breaks down overall physical performance of the user. It's absolutely fantastic. Let's also go over a general history of MyFitnessPal and the company as a whole, and I'll provide a setting and a timeline for the security attack event. MyFitnessPal was created and founded in 2005 by individuals called Albert Lee and Mike Lee. It was eventually purchased by Under Armour in 2015 for approximately $475 million. At this point, the application had about 80 million users, so quite a big user base, and Under Armour had the intention of expanding it further with its various resources. In 2018, however, the MyFitnessPal application and MyFitnessPal as a whole was a victim to a breach of data. The current user base was about 150 million users, so about 150 million users' data had been compromised. MyFitnessPal was also recently sold in 2020 to Francisco Partners for approximately $345 million. This demonstrates a reduction in valuation of the company. As I stated previously, about 150 million users' data were compromised during the attack. Specifically, the data that was collected by attackers were first, the usernames, second, the hash passwords, third was the knowledge of the hashing function bcrypt, fourth were the email addresses, and fifth were just any extraneous information about the height and weight of the users. Fortunately, no government ID or credit card information were collected from the users, as the users of the app did not put this information at the time of sign up. Therefore, it was not in the same data set as the passwords that were collected. MyFitnessPal users currently have no idea who is responsible for the attack, but authorities have deduced that there is an employee aiding in the attack of consumer information. A more detailed line of the attack is displayed here. In February 2018, the initial data breach was launched and attackers stole privileged information without the knowledge of Under Armour. However, on March 25th of 2018, Under Armour was made aware of the attack and the content of the information that was stolen. MyFitnessPal's immediate response, which came shortly after, was to reset all the affected users' passwords and post a notice of the MyFitnessPal breach for affected users to read over, explaining what the breach was. It was later found that the user information was found on the dark web being sold for $20,000. Now let's take a small look into attacker motivation. Although the culprit behind the attack is still unknown, we can deduce the attacker's motivation for the attack is pretty obvious. As mentioned prior, the data was collected was found on the dark web for about $20,000, which reinforces the theory that the attackers were actually searching for monetary compensation in return for stolen information. Alongside this, an obvious synergy of selling on the dark web is reputation. By providing this data set of information to interested parties on the dark web, it's obvious that notoriety of the attacker will increase and reputation will increase as well. The attackers also try to get passwords of the users logged into MyFitnessPal. However, since they couldn't get passwords but attempted to, we can assume that they're hoping to get more information or excessive information that was only utilized by using passwords, and then in turn getting more money. Let's also move into section 3, which is the attack vector and how the attack actually occurred. User passwords in MyFitnessPal are not stored directly in a database. Actually, they're stored after being encoded by an encryption function, and in this case, they're stored using bcryption. Few users at MyFitnessPal that joined very early, however, had their passwords encrypted using SHA-1, which is a hash function that is susceptible to brute force and dictionary attacks, making them a little unsafe and outdated. The rest of these passwords are encrypted using decryption, which utilizes key strengthening and salting to increase the length of an overall encrypted password. And this is not really susceptible to brute force decryption as it increases the time of decryption. Decryption is also based on the Blowfish cipher, and according to Dan Arias, decryption can be broken down into two phases. The first phrase is key strengthening. This includes using a salt and desired cost to order and create the AKS Blowfish instance that is eventually used to increase the length and complexity of passwords. The second phase begins when 128-bit salt value is concatenated with the results of an encryption loop. This is prefixed and stored in the database as an entity, and it also makes it very difficult to decrypt. Some added benefits of using decryption is that it is pre-image resistant, has a very large salt space, and can be adapted based on your affordable budget. It is also important to note how encrypted passwords play a large role in a security check. In this specific case, an internal employee had access and provided this access or a backdoor to the attacker in order to access the database with all the information. Next, the attacker is able to leverage this access to claim and steal all stored hash passwords in the database. The attacker then tries to decode the hash passwords by utilizing techniques such as dictionary attack and brute force decryption. Because bcrypt encryption techniques was used, the attacker is unable to attain the actual passwords and is instead stuck with hash passwords. The attacker, however, is still able to use brute force to access the information of users whose passwords were encrypted using SHA-1. Therefore, this means that SHA-1 is outdated and SHA-1 encryption should be removed from the MyFitnessPal security standards. The fourth section is consequences, and we're going to go into a little bit of the primary, secondary, and tertiary consequences. First is the primary consequences. The primary target for the attack was the actual company as a whole, which is Under Armour and MyFitnessPal. This is essentially synonymous with the Under Armour brand image, as the two of them went down after this attack. The company lost significant user base as the number of affected users who are not considering returning has increased a lot. This goes hand in hand with the fact that the popularity of the app went down, and this could totally be because news coverage of the attack was very, very high, making it a very public problem and reducing popularity. The value of the company also dropped monetarily as well, as stock prices of Under Armour dropped about 4%, maybe a little bit greater than that, after news broke out about the security breach. Looking at secondary consequences, we can deduce the secondary target for the attack was the actual user base currently utilizing MyFitnessPal and their health services. Trust in the company as a whole went down, increasing wariness to continue using the application for users. And MyFitnessPal had a great response to the attack and was lucky no more information was released, yet users still migrated away from the application due to two reasons. First was lack of trust in the company, and second was the necessity to change passwords and take the necessary course of action if user data was affected. Users may also have received phishing emails or malware attacks and ransomware attacks, and all of such because of their information being sold on the dark web. The tertiary attack target for the users were users that weren't currently using MyFitnessPal, but are technically thinking about it because they are in the health field and are very health conscious. These consumers are now aware of the possible attacks, store their information on health apps, and don't really like that. Wariness about opening accounts with MyFitnessPal has been increased, alongside wariness about opening any health applications in general. Trust and security of applications, any application in general on iOS or Android, has decreased. And as willingness to provide private information has decreased, the amount of total data available on each individual has also gone down, totally underscoring the drastic impact of this attack on the health community. We're now going to move into the conclusion and what we exactly learned. So there are two major lessons in this case. One is the importance of improper escalation of privilege, and the other is about the risk associated with outdated hashing during a security attack. First, employees should have escalated privileges to complete their work, but internal employees should only be given minimal privilege. This is because they may provide attackers with a backdoor to surpass the server's firewall. We also know that the hash function SHA-1 is outdated and should not be used to protect user passwords. We know that bcrypt, although useful at delaying attack proportionally to computing power, does not necessarily stop the attacker from taking data in general. So looking back, how can we prevent this from happening again? Well, we can improve the security of the data by increasing the necessary credentials to have escalated power. Alongside this, we can get rid of all SHA-1 hash protected information in the company and switch to a more useful and preventative hashing function. So now time for some questions. These are the resources that were used in the presentation in order to gain information and facilitate my learning as a whole. It also includes citation for all media use. The two questions I have for you today are, firstly, the MyFitnessPal attack was a case study depicting the importance of one of the security principles we learned in class, the principle of least privilege. What steps can MyFitnessPal take to improve internal security by employing and practicing least privilege? The second question is, although the attacker was unable to decrypt the passwords that were hashed using decryption, is this method of encryption still safe? Should MyFitnessPal consider employing any two-factor authentication methods we learned in class, such as SSN provision or duo push alerts? Why? Why or why not?